My biggest air count is 65,
Oh,
and it
wow.
was a $1.2 million tract of vacant land in Austin. I bought it all in with delinquent taxes for $250,000, and we literally sent people across the state with cash and deeds and notaries and aggregated all the interest over a couple month period and ended up netting about $1 million when it was done. I just sold it at market, but it was literally 65 people we corralled. My monthly legal bills are usually about $50,000 on average. And I was told in a deposition last month that I'm a plaintiff in 30 lawsuits at the moment.
This podcast episode is brought to you by Land Caller. Land cold calling designed by land investors for land investors. Go to landcaller.com for more information. Hey there, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Jack Bosch Show. I'm super excited to host today's shows with Logan Fullmer. And Logan is a very experienced real estate investor, does $30 to $40 million worth of real estate deals every single year, has a team of 20 people, came from the fix and flip world, but also does a ton of land deals. And really one of his specialties is dealing with distressed properties and with title issues. So we're going to jump into that deep today and really talk about, well, how do you get distressed properties, how you solve those issues, and how do you deal with some of the distress distress and title situations that you come across. Welcome to the show, Logan.
Jack, it's a pleasure.
All right, wonderful. Good to have you here. Let's jump right into this. So tell us what you do and tell us why in the world do you like complicated title situations?
Man, Jack, thanks for having me. You know, you built such a special program, a great following, and you have an incredible reputation in the space. So that's why I really wanted to come participate. So thanks for having me. Distressed real estate wasn't something that I intended to set out to do like a lot of people, but I just kind of found my way there. And today I'm about 10 years into real estate. I'm 43 next week. I'm a husband, a father of 4 kiddos.
Okay.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, 43. I'm halfway there. I'm father of 4 kiddos, married to their mama. It's just, we built this business for the last 10 years together, and we've got about 20 folks in our office today. And distressed real estate is a big part of our business. We'll talk about that today. That is that's our ordinary income stream. And after that, we put pretty much all of our money into an industrial portfolio and then large land development deals that we sell to builders. But the heart of my business is distressed property acquisition. And I got there when the market started to change from its last low, and competition was going through the roof. And I couldn't make any money without doing something different.
Yeah. That's what happened. So you started 10 years ago. That's 2014. That's right after you said 10 years, right? That's right after the big dip, and then just around that time is when prices in most markets started to really take off, and competition with it started to really take off. That's about right. So in essence, you're saying that distressed property is where a lot of people shy away from because it's they want to have the lower hanging fruit, and they're shying away from the extra step. Is that right?
That's right. Investors want good, cheap, fast. And distressed property is cheap, but it's not fast. And I meant easy, cheap, and fast.
Yeah.
And
it's not easy.
It's cheap, but it's not easy, and it's not really fast.
Yeah. No, I'm with you. I mean, on the land side of things, I used to like to say you're probably equal to that. There's not a whole lot of people, and you're probably one of them, that know how to solve title issues as good as I do, and you're probably equal, if not better. So let's talk about that. What does it mean, distressed property? What falls into that category?
A lot of people originally, when they originally hear the word, they think a house that's beat up and has deferred maintenance and needs repairs. And that is true. But when I say distressed, I mean title, paperwork, a property that can't sell through a traditional title insured transaction. If it can't pass muster there, that falls into the problem title. That's me.
Right. And why? What makes a property not being able to pass through the traditional kind of kind of situation, kind of title company? What are some of these things?
Lots of owners, feuding owners, missing owners, judgments and liens that outvalue the property, breaks in the title chain.
Probate.
Yeah, I always call those. I go blank at the moment, of course, but unresolved estates or orphaned estates.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember one time I got a deal with 64 heirs. Title company didn't want to touch it, and we actually let it go too. We didn't pursue that. I was like, that's too much brain damage for me, and the profits was not much. So we're like, let's
Oh
let
my
that go to the
gosh.
state, and then eventually it'll be refurbished back into the thing. So okay, so how do you go?
Hold on, I've got to tell you, my biggest heir count is 65,
Oh
and it
wow,
was a $1.2 million tract of vacant land in Austin. I bought it all in with delinquent taxes for 250,000, and we literally sent people across the state with cash and deeds and notaries and aggregated all the interest over a couple month period and ended up netting about $1 million when it was done. I just sold it at market, but it was literally 65 people we corralled.
yeah. I mean, then it is worth. In our deal, we would have made like 20 grand. And we're like, I'm not chasing 65 people for 30 grand. And we pursued it a little bit, but then very quickly we realized that 15 of them, nobody knew where they are. And we're like, just the search cost for that, because you can find them. You can find them if they're dead, then you get a death certificate, but then you're
Yeah.
dealing potentially with their heirs. That blows it up even more. We're like, no, skip, pass. Thank you. But at $1 million, it's a different deal. I mean, if at the end of the day you make $1 million profit, that's really cool. So okay, so let's go deeper into that. So distressed property, distressed not from a point of view of like it needs rehab. Like if John Smith and Susie Smith own their house and they just have neglected it and they're hoarders, this is a distress from a rehab point of view, but it's not a distressed title property. So you're referring more to distressed title properties where there's something wrong with a title, where there's something that needs to be fixed that requires some kind of like digging up of people, extra documents from people, and things like that. So let's go into some war stories. What kind of stuff have you seen in that?
Well, I'll tell you the first one that I did like this was by mistake. So this is part origin story, part war story.
Yeah.
I was working in the oil field and I was investing my money in infill lots in San Antonio 10 years. This was about 12 years ago when I started buying. And I was just, these lots were cheap, infill. And I remember thinking, I can buy a lot for $5,000 or $10,000 that's big enough, has utilities at the street, and it's big enough to put a house on it. I thought this is a good bet because there's probably no place or time where the value of that goes less than 5 or 10 grand because you can build a house on it and it's in a big city. So I spent everything I'd saved in the oil field, a couple 100,000. I picked up a couple dozen, about 26, 27 of these. And the market really started to change at that time. And I got laid off from my job. I sold a couple properties and recapitalized. And I decided I'm going to be a real estate guy at this point. But at this point, my first property I was offered $200,000 for, and I was only in the whole portfolio for 250,000. So that told me this little east side really exploded in value, and I'm onto something. So I had to liquidate a couple of them to get some cash in my pocket to,
Yeah.
pay my bills when I got laid off. And I remember one of the properties that was one of the higher value ones I was getting ready to sell. I went to the title company, and title report came back, and I owned 1/8. And I remember this was one of the very few that I bought without insurance. All of them I bought with title insurance, and this one seller is being aggressive, and I'm on like my 18th acquisition at this point, and he says, I'm not fooling with title, I'm not doing all that, just come bring me the money. And I was feeling frisky that day, and I brought him a check for 5 grand and a deed. And that was the deed that changed my life. But
Blessing in disguise, right? So it became a nightmare for a moment because you don't know what to do. But then that solving that problem gave you a skill set that, boom, now made you an expert and allow you to make money where other people only see problems. Is that right?
bingo. So I went back to the market and tried to buy more of these properties, but I realized they were all worth 100,000 or more now, the vacant lots. And I thought, oh darn, the honey hole, it's over with. But I was also during that summer spending time paying a lawyer, and he would tell me what step to do next. Go buy the next deed from this person. Oh, now they've got a child support lien. I have to go negotiate that with the attorney general. All these steps. And after that deal was done, it was still a great margin deal. I sold it for 125,000. I was all in it for like 15 or 20. And instantly I remember thinking, there's a bunch of property that has these problems in this side of town. And when I went back and looked through the ownership and the tax rolls, I realized these are the ones that haven't sold yet. Maybe there's a shot to go do this intentionally and still be able to get the low purchase price of 3 years ago, but in the current environment.
There you go. My wife says, I want to give credit where credit is due. Michelle always likes to say that these are plot twist moments of your life. You know, like how in a movie there's like something, and then there's a twist in the plot, and everything looks like it's falling apart, but then it turns into a blessing in disguise, and then out of that, the phoenix rises, and everything becomes beautiful. Well, that's kind of a plot twist moment of your life, because you like came into a deal, made a mistake, like didn't do proper title search, screwed up, gave this guy $5,000, ended up being an eighth of the property, and then realized that, oh, now I have to work. So did you solve that deal? Did you get the other 7/8?
I bought it all one at a time. Yeah.
One at a time. How much did you total spend to get those?
When it was done, I was all in for like 15, 20,000 range.
Okay.
I started off offering people $500 a piece. Some would want a little more. Some of them had liens, and a few people just gave me their share for nothing because they had liens that were up there.
Yeah. So then you have that done, and now you go back like, interesting. This is how, for example, I discovered one strategy that we call the excess proceeds strategy. That in many states, if a property has enough back taxes, it goes to auction. But if you let it go to auction, in some states, the person who had who owed the property taxes at the time it went to auction, if it goes for above what was owed in back taxes, that person gets the overage. And we discovered this by accident, by buying a property 2 weeks before an auction without title insurance, just getting a deed, not paying the taxes, and then it went to auction, and we thought, crap, we lost the property, and then we dug to the state statutes and found out that we have a claim for like, wasn't much, but it was a claim for like $7,000. They're like, great, like we only paid $100.
Let's do it.
Property. So like, great, let's collect on a $7,000, and then we're like, if that happened by accident, how about we do this on purpose? And we started actually finding properties that are very short before that we could buy just before the auction. We would still market them and see if we can sell them, but if nobody would buy them, we'd just let them go to auction and then drum up even some support at the auction so that bidding goes higher, and then collect the overage afterwards. So there's some really cool ways. It's those plot twist moments that you did that. So fantastic. So then how many deals? So then you started, obviously, if you have to deal with those things, different situation, every single deal, very quickly you become an expert in that, right?
That's right. You know, you brought up the excess proceeds. I've got to throw something in there. Sure. We had a similar event, not quite like that, but similar. And when the aha moment happened with us, we found a deal coming up quickly, and we weren't sure how to solve the last part of it. So we purchased the shares that we could, but the last few shares were just unable to be resolved. And we just let it go to the sale, collect the excess proceeds. And now that's our backstop. As long as we get it before the order of sale is issued, we'll buy shares, even if we know the title problem is not solvable, if we can get enough equity. And then we'll file a motion as an intervener to be added as a defendant, and then let it sail. Very similar. We think a lot alike in those regards.
Yeah. Or you can even attend the auction and then bid it in a way yourself up there and like buy it back and so on. As long as it is that, because at the auction it cleans up all the liens. So I mean, there's some restrictions around there, but still very cool. Yeah. So that's one strategy: finding lots with multiple owners, deceased owners, things like that, where the owners currently don't know how to solve that, and then get those deals. And it works for lots and it works for houses. This is not just we're talking about land because you like to do land lots, but it obviously also works for really any kind of piece of real estate out there. So in what kind of categories have you done kind of these kind of difficult closings?
Pretty much every category. I bought warehouses, I bought apartments, I bought nice houses, crummy ones. Folks come to me sometimes and say, I want to buy X asset class. how do I do that with distress? And I ask them to step backwards and say, don't do that. If you're looking for a certain type of asset in a certain location in this kind of condition and with distress, it might take you years and you don't have that kind of time. I recommend you shop by distress, not by asset class. No bad product, only bad pricing. Just get it priced right. And when you buy it, if it's not what you want, just sell it at market, make a bunch of profit. Use that money to go buy what you really want.
I think we're really thinking alike, because that's when people always come to me, it's like, I really want to buy that lot overlooking this mountain in this neighborhood. How do I get that for 20 cents on the dollar? And it's like, well, chances are you won't. And chances are it's $1 million lot. And nobody's going to give that to you for 200 grand. So what you need to do is you need to make $1 million with our standard strategies, and then go contact the owner and offer him market value.
Then go pay.
And you own your lot. It just you're still using the profits from your business by doing low value, by doing deals where you make a bunch of money in between, but you're not. But nobody can guarantee you that your dream lot or your dream house is going to be available at a discount.
You still effectively bought it at 20 cents on the dollar. It was just all these other properties at 20 cents on the dollar and rolled it proceeds wise into here.
Exactly right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. Yes. And so doing exactly the same thing. Good. So let's do a kind of a category of categorize some of these different difficult deals. Which one do you typically find the easiest ones to cure?
The one I see the most common is multiple owners. Life is life. We're not all born in the household, stay in the household, stay connected to folks. And as families grow and as you have human life problems, they split up. I find probably 60 to 70% of these deals are only multiple owners who just either don't get along and like each other, don't know about each other, or were unaware that they were an heir of an uncle's property. That's more common than any other. Now, there's about a third of them that are the judgments and liens, the breaks in the title chain, the lost trust certificate, all those things. But really, if you can locate people and you don't have to bring them together, you can deal with them separately because they don't like each other. The research, the conversation, that's to me the most important because that solves 70% of your problems.
Yeah. Makes sense. Now, do you ever come across some that are just like outrageously greedy and basically say like, ooh, I'm your key to making a bunch of money. Well, I want all that money. And how do you deal with those?
I have 3 solutions. The first one is you pay them. I had a man who lived in Peru who owned 30% of 1% of a property. His share wasn't worth much, but he demanded $20,000. Now, I'd purchased a $250,000 property for about 70, or at this time I was in it for $50,000. So I had tons of equity. He wanted 20 grand, far more than his share, and he held me over a barrel. But in this case, it still made sense to me, so I just paid him the 20 grand. The other option is I tell those people that I'll get back to them, and I go deal with everybody else, and I leave them to the very last. And almost every one of these properties have title defect or have delinquent taxes. So I'll then pay the delinquent taxes. And in Texas and many other states, they're equitable reimbursement case law. So I go to that person and say, you own 30%. The $10,000 in taxes that were owed, I paid those. So you owe me 30% of those taxes. You owe me that reimbursement. So you need to pay me that $3,000. And if you don't, I'm going to sue you and foreclose on your share of the property. So would you like to make a deal, or would you like me to take your share after $10,000 in legal fees? That's one option. Then the last option is
power, right?
Bingo. And the last option is I've collected equity along the way. I will never overpay for a share unless it's the final share or final shares. In this case, I just say, dude, you own 1% and you want lots of money. Let's just go sell it at market together. I'll get my 99% or my 90%, and you get your 1% or 10% of the proceeds. That's it. And you don't have to worry about me negotiating you down. You get your fair shake. If you won't agree to that, we'll file a partition lawsuit and a judge will sell it. And then you'll be responsible for legal fees, which means you'll net almost nothing. So if you agree with me and just sell, you'll get your fair share. So a partition is that third way. So it's agree and sell with them, sue them, or overpay them.
All right. And then typically when you explain it to them, they usually agree.
Yeah, such a large, I mean, if you're going to be in this business full bore and at a real scale, you got to be comfortable with litigation. You know, my monthly legal bills are usually about $50,000 on average. And I was told in a deposition last month that I'm a plaintiff in 30 lawsuits at the moment. So you get to build an internal docket that's, you know, fairly robust.
It might actually pay off for you to hire your own lawyer at this point, if you don't already have that.
Yeah, that's about right. One attorney that works for me full time in the office. The other four are experts in certain things like probate or whatever. I've got one of them that's a creditor type attorney, and we'll buy judgments and liens. We'll purchase them, we'll negotiate them, we'll strip them. So we have the different specialists, but the main generalist is for me.
All right, very cool. In that'll probably save you a bunch of money on the legal fees too there. Very, very cool. So interesting kind of things here. So guys, if you're listening to this or watching this, it's really fascinating how many niches you can be in real estate. So we know that a lot of people do like high equity, they do mortgage delinquents, they do probates, they do all this kind of thing. But everyone wants, as you said, everyone says easy, fast, and lucrative. And you just going after the hard, slow, and lucrative because in many cases those are also, there's a fourth kind of thing, because the easy, fast, and lucrative are usually not as lucrative because they have high competition. But if you go after hard, slow, you have low competition, and therefore you actually have lucrative. It's like Michelle and I, again, we talk every once in a while. It was like, when we started out, most cities, again, we do land flipping, most counties had a very rudimentary website. And some had already very advanced, particularly state of Florida had very advanced websites already. The state of Arizona, Maricopa County, where Phoenix is, had a really good website. A couple of other counties had really good websites. But down south, there were a couple of counties that literally just had this 1995 static website with a bunch of phone numbers, and that's it. So if you wanted to there was no data service that had land, there's no data service that you got anything from. So if you wanted to get any information, the only way it was, get in your car, drive 2.5 hours south, book an hotel room there on Sunday night, take a day out of vacation on Monday, go in there, microfiche. One after the other. But you know what? Those were the counties we made the most money with.
There you go.
Nobody else in the world is willing to do the extra step.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
So in essence, what you're doing is extra step investments.
You know, today, if a person would be listening to this and listen to my organization size and scope, it sounds very complicated and sophisticated. And a lot of folks would say, oh my gosh, that's just too much. I don't even feel like I want to try that because it sounds like the hurdles are too high. But the reality is it's actually the opposite. Yes, there's a fraction of this that's ultra complicated and it's different. But when I started doing this, I was literally looking for ownership problems and code compliance liens and delinquent taxes. And after about 1.5 years, I had an epiphany. All the properties I was dealing with were all delinquent on taxes, every one of them. And I realized it's so much easier to look by delinquent taxes because that's a high motivator. Then I'll find lots of title issues. And the ones that don't have the issues, I can't get the discount, so I won't negotiate those really. The ones that have the problems, I'll then negotiate the big discounts on. And 70% of those are only finding people and getting them to agree. So when I was doing this by myself, the first couple years, I maxed out between $750,000 and $1 million in net profit. That was me and a secretary. That's it. And I didn't know my head from my butt. I had a lawyer that would help me, and I'd hired a private investigator, and that was it. So it really is, I mean, I might have been one of the higher producers for that, but even if you cut that number in half, a solo person looking after messy tax delinquent deals, just aggregating owners, maybe with the help of an attorney some, is a very low barrier to entry.
Okay. So what do you think the number one skill sets that you need to go into that kind of niche? The top 2, 3 skill sets.
You know, ration and logic are probably high priority in the ability to negotiate and make people kind of like you. Early on, when I was telling people what I was doing, they would say, that's so risky. You don't have title insurance and you don't know if you're ever going to be able to get all the shares and all these things. And I remember thinking, y'all guys think this is risky. If I'm buying a 50% share of a $100,000 property, that's 50 grand in equity. If I'm only buying it for $5,000 or $10,000, I have 40 grand in equity. That doesn't seem risky to me. It might take me a while to get my money back out of it, but a lot of investments are like that. To me, it was ration and logic that allowed me to get there.
Yeah, there's some risk tolerance there because if you can't get the majority together, then you are somewhat restricted in what you can do with that. So you potentially do have some money tied up that you can't get beyond. But then also, as you start building some volume, it becomes a little bit of a numbers game.
Yep.
Like talking to like this morning, we did a webinar, and we had one of our mastermind members there. We have a mastermind for the very experienced real estate for very experienced land entrepreneurs, and he has just made $1 million on an entitlement deal, and he was talking about that. It took him 6 months to get this thing to entitlement, and he had to spend about $100,000 with all the draftsmen and the thing and the fees and the stuff and so on and so forth. And a lot of people might say, well, that is risky. Well, but therefore he made $1 million. And if you look at it, if you do, and I just making a case for business thinking, and which is the same case I think you're making, that if you're thinking, of course, if you spend 100 grand, most people don't have 10 batches of 100 grand to spend on something. But if 9 out of 10 deals are successfully entitled, or 9 out of your 10 deals are successfully done, and 1 you don't get to the finish line, then you're making 9 times, if in the entitlement world, you're making 9 out of 10 times $1 million, and 1 out of 10 times it costs you 100 grand and you get nothing for it.
No brainer.
That's a pretty good risk too. That's a very asymmetric risk kind of relation, that you can make $9 million and lose $100,000. That's an $8.9 million profit likelihood. I'll do that any day of the week, right? And are you thinking about basically a similar kind of way, that in one deal every once in a while you get stuck with something and you can't get the remaining shares until 5 years from now, but in 9 out of 10 cases you do? Or what's that ratio in the first place?
Well, I like where you're going with that, and I completely think the same way you do. If those odds could be had in Vegas, you'd get every dollar you could and take it and put it on red, you know? In this case, though, early on, I knew that if I couldn't find those last shares or couldn't negotiate with them, local attorney was telling me for between $10,000 and $20,000, I can do a partition lawsuit and the judge will force the sale and I'll get my equity out of it that way. So I never looked at it as I can't get it solved. I just thought, as long as I have excess of $20,000 in equity, I can always get my money back out of it in 9 months.
All right, so let's talk about that for a second. Partition sale judgment, or how is that called? Explain what that is.
So in Texas, it's section 23 of the property code. It's partition of real property. And we also have section 23A, which was amended, and section 23 was amended in 2019 to add section 23A. It was a Uniform Partition of Heirs Property Act. So it has some different triggers in there for appraisals and commissioners and whatnot. But in summary, you have the absolute right to access your equity in Texas. And the partition statute was in place for big ranches. They would partition it. Partition doesn't mean sell, it means cut it into pieces, basically. So usually when large tract owners would fight, they would go to a partition lawsuit. The judge would appoint a land commissioner or a surveyor, and they'd cut it into pieces and divvy it up. Jack gets half, Logan gets half. or Jack gets a third, Logan gets a third, and Jenny gets a third. But it gets tricky when it comes to houses. That's where the land will be sold or the house will be sold because you can't cut a 1 acre infill lot or a house in half. In Texas, you'll spend between $10,000 and $20,000 depending on if it's contested or not. It'll take 6 to 12 months, and you get your money. The judge will order it sold.
Beautiful. I mean, that's and what you said the minimum you have to have for that is 25%.
There's no minimum. You need greater than 0%. So you can own 0.001. Now, this type of lawsuit is used on the East Coast when developers want a property to sell. They'll buy 2% and force the sale, and then they'll have a straw buyer go buy at the auction. That's not us. We're looking to make an exit. So as long as you have any share, now for us, we need to have a great enough share of equity to make it profitable.
Yeah, to make it worth spending 20 grand on this piece. Yeah, that makes sense. That triggers how much equity you should have. But worst case scenario, you can at least get rid of the land, get rid of your ownership, and so on. Okay, very cool. And then there's always the back offer of like letting it go to tax sale and collecting the overage.
Yeah.
If you do that, and that again depends on which state you're in. In tax lien states, that doesn't work, and only works in tax deed states. Yeah. So important thing, you're talking about Texas. So make sure, audience, if you're listening to this, make sure that you actually check how those rules are in the state that you want to do business with, because I can imagine the Social Republic of California is doing that very different than Texas.
Oh, you know what else? That brings up another extremely interesting point. Tax lien or tax deed matters. Also, equally as important is it a probate or an affidavit of heirship state?
Okay.
If it's an affidavit of heirship state, different states call it different things, small estate affidavit, whatever, affidavit of heirship, that is in lieu of probate. If a will was not left, or if a will was left and not probated, you can do an affidavit of heirship. That's a statutory form where a couple of people sign it with an owner, and you file it, and it points to all the heirs. But if you're in like Florida or California, you have to do a probate. Yeah. You have to have a personal representative, and an affidavit of heirship can point to the heirs of 10 dead people. In Florida, 10 probates.
Yeah. And those are important things to do. So before you jump in, it's like, hey, let me find all the people with like 65 dead people in there on the deed. Make sure you do a little bit of research on there. But it's beautiful to talk about this because we have never had a guest that talked about these kind of particular things. Like we have done plenty of affidavit of heirships, also in Arizona called affidavit of succession. You can use both of them. Many times, like somebody inherited the property from dad or from mom, and it's worth $30,000, and the limit used to be $50,000. It's higher now. You simply have them fill that thing out, fill out the form with $170, send it to the county courthouse. 6 weeks later, you get the probate is complete, and you can buy the property from the person that's still alive. So very easy, very simple process. Most people just don't know that exists. So make sure you look at it. You Google those things, small estate probates and things like that, and then you'll learn very quickly what works in which state. With that said, I just wanted to make sure that what Logan is describing works beautifully in Texas, works in many other states too. But you got to look at the legality on the ground in that particular state. Wonderful. Thank you very much. I think we're coming towards the end of our session here. So I know you have a big team, you have a thing, but you also offer some educational services around these kind of different things that you do. Tell us a little bit about what they do and how people can find you.
I'm glad you brought that up, Jack. Thank you. I've got some online courses that talk about all of the title defects, why we go look for them, how we identify them, what we do with those. You know, they're 4 to 6 hours of curriculum. But once a year, I do a sizable event, usually about 500 seats, and it's 8 hours of my business model, what it takes to go from flipping or wholesaling into this full-time if you want, part-time if you like, and the ins and outs of this. And I bring my whole office, and it's a fun day. And then outside of that, we do coaching. It is limited to 50 people a year. There are 2 rounds of coaching per year. It's 25 people and 25 people. We don't ever take more because I want to give good service. But it's easy to get to. Put my name, Logan Fullmer, into Instagram, and you won't miss us.
All right. Sounds good. Well, with that said, thank you very much for being on the show with us. that is a wrap. I really enjoyed this, talking about the title issues, because after having done 5,000 land deals, I can tell you we found, I don't know, like thousands of deals. It's very common that we actually have to tell the title company what they need to do. So the title company's like, I don't know how to close this. It's like, do this. Let me check with my manager. They come back 2 days later. You're right. This is exactly what we need to do. And then we close the deals. But it's fun because like knowledge is power. If you know how to solve these problems turn into minor hurdles and just turn into a checklist of things that you need to do. You do the checklist, boom, you unlock all this value in those properties that people are willing to give away just simply because they don't open the internet, they don't start researching, they don't spend a few $100s on an attorney to sometimes get an answer of what needs to be done, or they hire a stupid attorney, which there's plenty of those too, and they just don't know what to do. If you have that experience, if you learn that, it's really cool. So check out Logan, check out his Instagram, check out his what he does. With that said, thank you very much. That's a wrap. As always, give us that 5-star review, share it with your friends, and I'll see you in the next show. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.